what's shaking, everybody? Welcome to, we're all back. It's a Monday. It's Overreaction Show. Overreaction Monday here on Orange Bloods Live. I'm Jeff Ketchum, joined by Anwar Richardson, Alex Dunlap, the whole crew here. Do us a solid, like, comment, subscribe, do all those things. Just hit a bunch of buttons. They help the algorithm. We do appreciate your contributions, and we do appreciate everybody jumping into the Specs chat, commenting, giving us your super chats. As always, if you super chat, we tend to cut you right to the front of the line, let you interrupt the show, all that stuff. Fellas, it was a long 4th of July weekend. A lot of stuff happened, certainly on the recruiting side of things. Everybody's taking a big, deep breath and trying to assess exactly what it all means. Anwar, I'll just come to you first. Welcome back. What's your vibe coming back after the last week or so of Texas football recruiting, where we've seen DeCorian Moore pick a school, and it's not Texas? We've seen borderline 5-star linebacker Riley Pettyjohn pick a school. It wasn't Texas. Lamont Rogers, not a huge surprise, but he picks Missouri when Texas was on the table. And, you know, here we are on a Monday, and there's been some panic in the streets. I think we've tried to calm the panic, and yet sometimes you just can't stop what the inevitable is going to bring. Your vibe as we get started on a new week of shows on a Monday.
Well, yes, thanks. Good to be back. There's a lot of different things. I think there's a reality of it that we can't put lipstick on a pig and act like Texas didn't receive a couple of big L's over the past couple of days. Like, you can rationalize it. We'll talk about what the other options are, but we can't sit here on a Monday and act like Texas did not want DeCorian Moore. Like, we can't act like, well, you know, there's other guys that you can get that'll be just as good. No, I mean, he's really good. So, Ketch, I start with that. You have to acknowledge that there are L's, even if the Lamont Rogers thing wasn't as big of an L. I think of, you say a reaction, I have so many, right? I think of the conversation that you and I had over the weekend and start wondering, like, when is the last time Texas was able to nab one of these 5-stars out of the state of Texas, 5-star receivers more specifically. And these are things that you would have hoped that Steve Sarkisian going into year 4 would be able to obtain, and we wouldn't be talking about what these obstacles are or not. I still know there's 149 days left until signing day, so anything can happen. But for right now, Catch, it's more of accepting the L, and then trying to figure out where does Texas go from here as far as the next steps are concerned. But if Texas, the last thing I'll say on it, and I'll let you jump back in, if Texas had gotten Moore and all the other guys that we're talking about, it would be a victory lap today. So we can't act like there would be no victories to be had. So we have to, kind of have the same energy and say, all right, well, it was kind of an L, but there's still plenty of other guys that are out there.
Alex, you've been very much a DeCorian Moore by any means necessary kind of guy. Your first time to really comment. Well, I guess we did the show on Friday. God, it feels like that was 3 months ago.
Yeah.
Your reaction coming out of the weekend on kind of the totality of things.
First of all, I mean, it's like to catch and everybody out there in the path of the hurricane. Everyone stay safe, right? Just want to get that out there. I see somebody in the chat saying he lost power in Galveston, so hopefully Catch will be on for the rest of the show there in Houston. But certainly keeping all you guys there in our thoughts. As far as DeCorian Moore and just Catch, as far as the weekend, the more I've thought about it, and it happened in an aggregate way where it felt like things were compounded each other, and these guys had all announced on the same weekend, the same group of days. People were off for their 4th of July stuff, paying extra attention while they weren't having to be at work. It felt a little bit like one of these weekends where it's like, next week we go to SEC Media Days, and right after that we're going to have football coming right back up. It feels like people are starting to tune back in a little bit. And whenever you get, We knew that Pettyjohn wasn't going to commit, right? We knew there was a good chance Brandon Brown was going to flip. We knew that Lamont Rogers. It felt like that was that was a thing at the very end where Texas sort of got back in it, but that was like to be honest, I think we can all say that any of those three guys would have been like found money based on everything that we knew coming into that, right? We knew Cade Phillips was going to commit, and we basically knew DK Moore was going to commit to Texas. So whenever I think back over the whole weekend and everything with DeCorian Moore not committing to Texas and committing to Oregon, it felt like it had this cascading effect on the rest of the whole weekend. With that being said, it's like everything else that happened, we kind of thought was going to happen. Right. It was the DeCorian Moore thing and the fact that all these other things happened where everybody just comes in droves and say, what the hell's going on in recruiting at Texas?
Well, I think, there was some denial with Riley Pettyjohn because it was 2 weeks to the day when we were in Jacksonville and Riley Pettyjohn first popped up and started talking about USC and Ohio State being his top two and Texas wasn't in it. And the initial response from a lot of people was, oh, he's just pulling your leg.
All right.
He's just trying to drum up suspense and negotiating, and this is how the game is played. And we were trying to tell people, like, no, man, like, either the kid is just lying out of his teeth to everybody, or, like, this is kind of where things stand. And, yeah, by the time we got to Saturday, there was a real sense that, okay, well, Texas isn't going to be the pick. It wasn't a huge shock. I think the DeCorian Moore recruitment is the one that has everybody staggered. The images of DeCorian's grandmother and Sarkeesian and all of the family photos. And I think if the recruitment stops right then, Texas is the winner. The very next week, he takes that trip out to Oregon. And his family, like his mom, who's done most of the interviews, I've seen very little from DeCorian himself. It said coming right out of that visit, they were blown away, that the coaches did a great job. I wrote about it in my 10 Thoughts on the Weekend that in a weird way, Texas never really had a chance to respond to that visit. That, if he waits until December to make an announcement, the visit wears off a little bit. You've got time to fight back from that. He comes back from that Oregon visit riding that high. The dead period begins. And I think, Oregon ends up being the choice. I think what's really interesting in the conversation that we'll probably have today that I think, falls in line with the headline on the video and the thumbnail on the video is that late last week, so just a few days ago before the announcement, the general feeling was I had a source specifically tell me, a great source, someone that I lean on a lot, say Texas will get DeCorian Moore in December. I have no doubts about that. Whatever happens when he makes his announcement on Thursday, the 4th of July, is whatever happens. But we're going to stay after him. We think we've got the best NIL package. We think in time, this, once the negotiations are done, it will be Texas. It feels like that was everything that I was being told leading up to the announcement. And now on a Monday, I wonder, is Texas done with DeCorian Moore? Early Saturday evening, Steve Sarkeesian comes out along with Brandon Harris, his general manager, with a couple of tweets that I had somebody who is fairly close with DeCorian Moore yesterday. There it is on the screen. Felt like that was a subtweet directed directly to DeCorian Moore. And the source that I spoke with said, if DeCorian had committed to Texas, Dan Lanning wouldn't be on social media subtweeting towards Moore. I didn't really know how to respond to that. It's not my job to really get involved.
Do you think it's a subtweet? Do you think that's a subtweet?
I did when I saw it. Yeah.
Kind of felt like one, didn't it?
I mean, the timing is so close that you have to know, even if you're not trying to do that, even if you're not subtweeting towards a couple of teenagers, somebody has to be around to say, hey, the appearance of that might make things complicated. I'll need to check in with sources this week, but there's a lot of scuttlebutt. Hey, well, Texas is just going to move on. Look, maybe there's just some hurt feelings. The Longhorn football program and the institution itself goes higher in NIL with DeCorian more than any player it's ever gone. More than $500,000 more than I think they've done with just about anybody else. And we go from extending out that way. And when I asked about it, I was told, well, we'll go the distance. We'll go that far for DeCorian. To on a Monday, are they calling Kelshawn Johnson and trying to reignite that? Do they move on? Obviously, they're still recruiting Jamie French. They're still recruiting Khalil Lockett. There's a world out there where the wide receiver class can still be really, really good. You know, I think the one thing on War that it would be healthy for Steve Sarkisian and his staff to do is do an internal audit of, hey, what happened here? What's the real reasoning? If we just got out-NIL'd, then so be it. I really don't think that's what happened. If it's something else, if the message that Oregon is selling connected with more so than the message that Texas was selling, and it seems like DeCorian and his mom, specifically his mom, hit some talking points that you would think, boy, that sounds like something a coach probably put in their ear that, you know, do something different, be your own man, go out to Oregon and blaze a trail that others aren't blazing. It's just, I don't know. I wonder if Sarkisian and his staff are taking time for a little self-reflection, knowing that they've lost a couple of big targets, or do they just say, this isn't about us. We've done nothing wrong. We know how to recruit. Our messaging isn't a problem. All these kids be damned. We're going to keep doing what we're doing, and there's no real reason to change anything.
Yeah, well, one, they're on vacation this week, so I'm not, so I'm not quite sure what the reflection portion of that's going to look like at this moment. The tweet itself, Catch suggests that there won't be that kind of reflection going on. The tweet itself suggests that if you don't want to be a part of it, so be it. I mean, this program ain't for everybody, which is not what anyone was saying. A few days prior, to that that tweet comes as a reaction to the losses that occurred. That there's that. So I don't know if there's going to be that reflection, but if the question is, should there be there? I would say that should be, Catch, because if you're saying that the Oregon money wasn't more than what Texas is offering, and what DeCorian's mom basically uttered, when she came out of that visit, is that she said, quote, the love that they have for my son is so genuine. I know they'll take great care of him. Yeah, there's a way that Oregon connected with him that you probably want to say, okay, I want to make sure, like, this is, did we miss anything here? Was it just as simple, as simplistic as, and one of the points I've brought out for the past couple of weeks has been the Rashad Samples thing, and the Rashad Samples having the connections to Duncanville and having connections of being a fantastic recruiter. Was it just simply Rashad Samples, just out recruited Texas, and it is what it is? I think there should be some sort of reflections, because I think if you're Texas, Catch, and you're coming off of a season where we're talking about, you said these are all the ingredients that we need to land the elite players consistently, right? And so if you're saying, like, hey, Catch, I've been here for how many years? Texas just has to win, right? So they only got the wins. Texas has got to make it to the playoffs. Well, you made it to the playoffs. Well, the SEC thing has always been something that people use against Texas. Texas is going into the SEC. So all the reasons and excuses. Now what I hear now, Catch, and I know you've heard all this weekend, Nike's just pouring all that stuff into it. They got an old man who's in his 80s and he just wants Oregon to win. And they're just spending all this kind of money. They're just so desperate. And it's like, okay, at some point, you just got to go and say, all right, let's stop using excuses. Let's do an internal audit and make sure you get these kind of guys, because you don't want to get too cocky going forward. But I'm sure in their minds, Catch, there's plenty of other fish in the sea. There's plenty of other guys that are out there that don't get the Corian. There's other guys that they'll get. But it's still, I think, just to shoulder shrug it and act like, no problem. I wouldn't think that to be the smartest move.
See, Alex, I think Onward makes a really interesting point, and I feel like this is the complicated part in a sense, because the Texas position, and to be fair, like, I don't think that this point that I'm about to make is a reactionary to Decorian Moore's commitment, because I was talking to sourcing before the official visit started in June, who was saying, I don't even really care about these official visits in June. Like, whatever I hear, what really matters is what's going to happen in September, October, November. There's a real sense behind the scenes at Texas that because of NIL, because of the evolution of NIL, and now, that first year, not everybody had an agent, not everybody had a representative, but in 2024, they do. Like, everybody's got somebody who's leading the negotiations, and it's not mom and dad with every kid anymore. These are all guys that have some sort of representation, and there's a feeling that what happens in July will set the table for negotiations that occur in the fall. And I can just tell you that I've heard from more than a handful of people that there's an expectation that we'll see more flips in the fall than we've ever seen before, not just with Texas, but just in the general landscape of college football, that everybody needs to be prepared for what will be a hurricane of changes once, take a guy like Lamont Rogers. He commits to Missouri. He's got a healthy NIL package in front of him. And yet I haven't spoken with anybody, and that includes people on the Oklahoma side, kind of includes people on the Missouri side, that don't think that there won't be a couple of twists in that recruitment, even though he makes his announcement on Saturday for Missouri. By the way, kudos to Jason Sukumel. He's been singing Missouri for Lamont Rogers for months. And I've just always have been, there's no way Texas and Texas A&M and Oklahoma are all going to want Lamont Rogers. There's no way that kid ends up at Missouri. And for now, he's committed at Missouri. But, there's panic in the streets to a certain extent. And the Texas people will tell you, don't freak out. That this is all part of what we think this is a marathon. This is a 400-meter race, and we've only gone around the track twice. There's a lot of race left to go, which is part of why I don't know that I understood the intentions of the tweets from Brandon Harris and Steve Sarkisian. If that's the case, this should have been somewhat expected, and you keep doing your thing, you keep doing the battle. Do you feel like this is a legitimate moment of, I don't know, panic shouldn't be the word, I don't think, but you shouldn't probably have a laissez-faire attitude either. There's got to be somewhere in between to kind of sense the moment, because it's not like Texas is killing it in recruiting right now with the top prospects in the state of Texas. If you look at the top 10 right now, the top 20, Texas is on pace right now to maybe have a couple of guys off that list, but, potentially none, Alex, in the Rivals top 10. Of the top 10, kind of depends on what Michael Fusi does. But if they don't get Fusi, you could be talking about an 0 for 10 if things don't change.
When's the last time that happened, Cash? Can you think of it off the top of your head?
It happened in 2017 and it happened in 2020, which that was Charlie Strong's final recruiting year, and it was the second to last for Tom Herman. Right as things started, the wheels started to come off. The thing is, if you look at the Rivals top 10, and look, if it was me and Alex, Lance Jackson's in this top 10, but no doubt. But you don't want to get to a point where we're arguing one guy.
Yeah.
And then suddenly we're not seeing the forest through the trees. 6 of these guys have already committed, 4 of them to schools. The top 4 committed kids in the state right now are committed to either Oregon or Ohio State. Keelan Russell's at Alabama. He's actually going to go up in the rankings the next time they're updated. I don't think Charles Ross is a top 10 prospect, but not trying to argue that too much. 6 of the top 10 already committed out of state, right? Andrew Marsh at number 7, trending towards Michigan. Ty Haywood trending heavily at number 5 towards Alabama. Jonah Williams allegedly trending. He doesn't do a lot of interviews. It's sometimes tough to get a real read on Jonah Williams, but possibly trending to Oregon as well. That leaves Michael Fusi as the last remaining guy for Texas, Texas A&M, and Oklahoma. None of the big 3 regional schools in the state of Texas, the schools that typically dominate, none of them have a commitment in the top 10 right now. So whatever this is, it's not one school. It's not either A&M or Oklahoma has asserted its will in recruiting, and Texas has to adjust to that. This is something different. This is the big 3 kind of being completely left out outside of potentially that Michael Fusi decision whenever that comes in, which looks like a Texas-Oklahoma battle, and that might be trending towards Oklahoma at the moment.
Gosh, man, that can't happen. That can't happen with Fusi. Now that this has happened, we talked about it the other day, Catch, but it was DeCorian Moore no matter what, but even more so, it was Mike Fusi no matter what. So, I mean, they got to get that done. It's
take that DeCorian Moore money and
just whatever, right? Or just take the lesson. Take the lesson that, like, you know, those were the 2 marquee crown jewel players of the class, right? Those are the guys. It's like, if you got to go up a little bit higher than you're used to going, take that as a lesson, and don't wait until 2026 to implement it, right? Don't say, gosh, this happened with DK Moore and this happened with Fusi in 2026. We can't. No, like, you got to change midstream in 2025. Now, as far as the sentiment that DeCorian Moore and all this stuff with NIL has changed the face, like, I mean, of course, it's a little bit of cope, right? Like, but I mean, we all know NIL's changed the face of everything. It's changed recruiting. It's changed everything about it. It's the Wild West. And Steve Sarkisian will be the first to tell you that he embraces that and he likes it. We're in an environment now where you could be the first mover, and even if things get a little bit weird with how you might have to deal with something or any particular process or set of processes that might be in a little bit of a gray area. If you're a first mover, it's like kind of shoot first, ask questions later kind of environment. I think that's what Steve Sarkisian wants. So I don't think that he's a guy, based on his comments previously or based on the way that we've seen him just interact with this whole process, is somebody who is going to say, like, oh, well, it's because of this new wave of NIL that this, like, that's not how, like, he wants to attack it. He doesn't want to be afraid of it. I don't know if it's always the best thing, though, to say, oh, who cares if they committed right now? All that matters is what happens whenever we get to NSD1, and when they flip and they end up flipping. And, you know, my initial reaction with the Oregon stuff was saying, well, who knows? He could end up flipping back. We saw, I mean, Kelvin Banks and Cam Williams were once committed to Oregon at this exact same point in the summer at one point. And, you know, Jason did kind of come back on that and said, yeah, but that was with, I guess, was that still Mario?
That was with Cristobal, though.
It's like he
was flipped because he took the
offensive line coach. I mean, I get it. But Texas has flipped, guys. Texas has ended up okay at the end of these things. I think you can give them some credit for saying, like, hey, man, listen, we got this. But I do think it's just, like I said, it's kind of cope to come in after this weekend and say it wouldn't have even mattered if they would have committed anyway. The only, like, of course you would have rather have this where DeCorian Moore is listed on that Rivals page that Ketchum just put up with Texas next to his name, right? As opposed to Oregon. It does kind of matter.
Real quick, Buck Wild, sorry it took so long to get to you. It's my fault. $5 super chat. They probably sold early playing time. Lanning probably showed him the Texas roster and pointed to Cook and Wingo.
No. You don't do
I
that.
don't think that's it, Buck Wild.
No, but you let me tell you this: in recruiting, when you do stuff like that, that actually, and the catch could tell you that actually can backfire against you. And that's seen it happen before, because then what you're telling the kid is that he's not good enough, and no kid wants to hear he's not good enough. And so you're basically, if you lead with, man, look at that, you're not good enough to be better than those guys.
Good point, man. I guess I never thought about that. That's kind of counterintuitive and smart for sure.
This is what A&M used to do when Mac Brown was recruiting. Aggie players would say, why go there? You can play for us right away. If you go to Texas, there's so many great players, you'll never play. And it makes you look like small time, and it looks Texas look like the place to be.
Like the place that makes good players.
Great talent doesn't keep Georgia and Alabama from stockpiling every year. And Oregon has talented players. It's not like they've got the thing we also have to say is Oregon is not some Johnny come lately new school that Oregon's a college football power. They've been recruiting at a high level for a long time. They played in a national championship game more recent than Texas has. I mean, they've been a more viable college football program over the last 15 years than Texas has. So it's not like Oregon lucked into this. They've got a guy in Dan Lanning that turned down the Alabama job. They are expected to be a national championship contender kind of on the regular, although we'll have to see how they adjust to the Big Ten similarly to Texas adjusting to the SEC. It is a different ball game for them. But, you know, when kids commit to Oregon and say we're going there because we are going to compete for national championships there, that's not lip service. They're going to be really, really good. It's not like he chose, a program that's not on the level. That's not what Oregon is. So I don't think, you can be dismissive of Oregon and just say it's only NIL. Oregon's had street cred with young kids for a long time. And I think, though, the one thing that I would – and I wrote about this in my 10 Thoughts on the Weekend. One of the things, if you're Texas, they've been able to stockpile talent in the last 3 recruiting classes to such a degree that only at really defensive tackle and maybe linebacker do you look at and say they're not recruiting elite talent at a really high level. You wouldn't say it about quarterback. You wouldn't really say it about running back or wide receiver. The offensive line has been able to, Brandon Baker a year ago, the 2022 class, they've got more elite talent on the offensive line.
They still need that Brandon Baker in this class, though, Kat.
They do, and they need to get Michael Fusi. There's no doubt about that. But you look at the edge position, they've really boosted there. They've recruited really well in the secondary. This is a program that has elite level young talent all throughout it. So what do you really need to accomplish? Well, you need to get super blue chips. You need to also sign elite level guys. So what are we talking about? You need to get, they, from the Rivals rankings, they signed 5 last year. 5 high 4 stars or 5 stars. You add a couple of elite level. Nothing I can do about that, guys. I'm in a hurricane.
That's your phone? That's your phone?
That was an iPad, actually. So was it phone? I had that taken care of. The charging iPad, not so much. By the way, it is really I'm seeing full-on hurricane stuff now. Like, it is intensified in the last 10 minutes. If I'm not on the show at any point in the next 10 or 15 minutes, definitely hurricane related. They need to come away from this class with a half dozen super blue chips. The goal every year should be to have a minimum of 6 or 7. And if you're doing that every year, you're going to be a top 5 program at all times in terms of high-end talent. If you're doing 6 or 7 a year over a 4-year window, that's 24 to 28. Let's say attrition takes a half dozen of those away. You're still in the 20 range. And right now, Texas ranks fourth in the country with 19 super blue chips on its roster, consensus super blue chips, meaning more than one recruiting service named that kid as an elite of the elite prospect. Georgia, let's see, Ohio State's got 29. Georgia's got 28. Alabama's at 25. Texas is fourth at 19. So if you're Texas, you know, what you still want to be able to do is stockpile as much talent as you can. DeCorian Moore be damned. And you look at the landscape and you go, okay, well, look, Fusi is still out there. Jamie French is still out there. Khalil Lockett is still out there. Michael Terry is still out there. The California Firmino, the Faramo,
Madden Ferriamo, he's good, right?
The kid from California is out there. So there's still a number of guys out there that haven't made decisions that I expect Texas to get a handful of those guys. You make a couple of flips, you do well in the portal, and I promise you 12 months from now, we'll be going into the 2025 season, and we'll be talking about this recruiting class adding to the talent level the way that it should. It's just that, you know, I think the names may look a little different than Texas fans would have thought 3 weeks ago when they would have been convinced, okay, DeCorian Moore, if we get 6 or 7 of these super badasses, DeCorian Moore is going to be one, Riley Pettyjohn's going to be another, and then we'll go from there. So I don't think it's time to panic, and I think Texas will eventually accomplish what they need to do in recruiting, which there's a separate conversation to be had, I suppose, about linebackers and defensive tackles, because those are the two biggest needs in this class, Anwar. They're not desperate for quarterbacks. They're not desperate for receivers even. They're going to be okay there. There's a real sense of urgency, I think, at linebacker and defensive tackle. And, you know, they may have to go into the portal. They may have to do some different things to build a bridge to how they eventually solve those problems for good. It may mean, good God, I wish I could just turn the camera and show you guys what it looks like outside my house, but
is it mainly wind or is it just torrential rain? Is it both?
All of it. Like, I kept thinking to myself, this doesn't look like anything. It's not even strong winds. There's strong winds now. The hurricane has hit the woodlands. Wow. It's interesting to it's hard not to be distracted on water.
Oh, dude. I mean, I could tell. I'm just looking at the radar right now. And if you can look and see, you guys are on the dirty side of it, right? And it just
it was supposed to hit us.
I said,
9 o'clock.
I wonder where that is. And it's like exact. I zoomed in and it's just, I said, that looks like where it's worst. And where I zoomed in, it just says the Conroe and the Woodlands right
That's
there.
me. That's me.
Crazy.
And the thing is, I have my windows open so that I can get some light in here. Otherwise, this room would be so dark. But it's hard not to like notice that the trees look like they're about to bend over.
Hey, Ketch, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So I want to do a screen share, but I know with this new thing, before I used to be able to put it in queue, so I know I've learned throughout. It's like, oh snap! So I want to share this with you, and I kind of just like to get your overall take as to where Texas is right now. Are you seeing this?
Yeah.
So okay, so. As you talked about certain things, you have Oregon that's actually ranked 5th right now, Ketch, right? As far as these rankings, these rivals rankings are concerned. And you're good at seeing, okay, you know, I'm going to get down to Texas in a second, right? But you're able to see the what they have, the average number, the points, like all those kind of things. If I keep going down, Ketch.
By the way, I'm glad I don't have DirecTV.
Oh God.
Wouldn't be watching any TV today.
No,
yeah, man.
Texas
is way down the list.
So SMU is at 29, okay, and here we got Texas here at 31. Just your general take as to where Texas is now and where you might expect them to finish when it's all said and done, because 31. Again, this is overreaction Monday. But if I've got Ohio State, Alabama, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, by the way, at 4, and Oregon at 5, should I be a little surprised from a recruiting perspective that Texas is sitting at 31?
You can look at volume of
Probably,
commits too.
because you would have anticipated a week and a half ago or 2 weeks ago that DeCorian Moore and Riley Pettyjohn. So you would have expected, well, Texas would probably be at 15 or 16. So just being at 15 or 16 would have them much higher on the list.
Oregon has 15 commits.
I don't really worry about team rankings in July. And in fact, okay, I think it's kind of stupid. Like if an A&M fan goes, Texas is behind SMU in the recruiting rankings as like some form of a gotcha moment, I think they don't know a lot about recruiting. I think the number, go back down to Texas for a second. I'll tell you the number that you should keep an eye on. It's that number, that little 362. When that is the average star ranking per prospect. When you look at the teams around them, Minnesota's above them at 3. SMU's above them at 3.18. Oklahoma State 3.17. If you scroll up, I think, and you go towards the top, Ohio State and Oregon are setting the pace. They're averaging 4 stars per every recruit. Georgia's at 3.67. They've got 18 commitments. Texas is eventually going to fill up with 4-star stars, and they'll go up in the rankings. I don't think Texas has to sweat very hard to end up with a top 10 level recruiting class. The issue is top 10 isn't really much different than top 25. Can Texas get into the top 5? I think in order to do that, and if you look at Oklahoma, it's not Oklahoma at 4 and Texas at 31 that would catch my eye. It's that Oklahoma has a 3.81 average star ranking per player, which is pretty considerably higher than Texas's 3.62. Texas hasn't really brought in any elite guys. The thing that you do when you look at what Texas has committed right now, it doesn't stand out very much. KJ Lacey's probably the highest rated prospect that Texas has. Only Rivals ranks KJ Lacey as a national top 100 player. The other 3 major services don't. So, if then Lance Jackson is probably number 1. Although at the moment Rivals has him ranked a tier below. Lance Jackson is going to end up being a top 10 guy in the state of Texas. He's just on the outside with basically every service. Everybody's got him at 11 or 12 or 13 or something like that. Texas got to sign some big dogs. And until they do, they won't be in the team rankings where they want to be. But, again, I just mentioned a handful of super blue chips that we expect to announce in the next couple of weeks. A couple of them probably before the end of July, a couple of them next Monday. When Nick Townsend makes his announcement, and Michael Terry's probably right around the corner. The Longhorns are going to be fine. They're going to end the thing. What's going to actually happen, Anwar? They're going to finish with a top 10 recruiting class, and then people will act like that's a big deal, and it's not. That there's a real difference between the top 3, 4, 5 classes in America and what happens after that. And I only count super blue chips, really. Everything else is kind of the same. There's not a huge difference between the run-of-the-mill 4-star and your average 3-star. I mean, there's a difference, but it's not so significant that A, you should lose sleep over, or B, that it can't be mitigated, a la we've seen in the Big 12 for the last decade, where how many 5-stars do you need to beat TCU? Well, the answer is more if you don't have a whole lot. And, when Steve Sarkisian took over, I wish I had set the graphic up so that we could go full screen and look at the graphic that shows how the talent has risen under Steve Sarkisian. It's night and day from where it was in 2020 and 2021. That's the only thing I really pay attention to. What does the top of your recruiting class look like? Because, if you sign a 25-man class in 2024, half of those guys are out the door after 2 years anyway. It is really Darwinism has really kicked in college football. Patience is not the name of the game. It's one of the things even I've said about the commitment that the Longhorns picked up this weekend in Cade Phillips. I think he's a really good player. But Texas, if you look at the safety position, they've recruited really well there. And when this season goes by and suddenly Andrew Makuba is gone, we still have Derek Williams left that will be a starter going into 2025. You've got Jelani McDonald. You've got Xavier Filsaime. You've got Jeremy Johnson-Rebel. They've recruited really well at the safety position. So if you're Cade Phillips, you're going to come in and getting into that too deep and you'll still have Michael Taft. Like they'll still have 4 or 5 safeties that this freshman class will come into, that it might take a year or 2, or maybe going into year 3 before you're really competing for a starting job in the 2 deep. And the problem with that in 2024 is that you don't see very many guys who are that patient. And quite frankly, you see a lot of programs who are so eager to get new talent in that they'll run guys out earlier than they would have in the past. The success stories like a Christian Jones, I think, will be far and fewer between, or Tavondre Sweat, where guys in their 4th, 5th, or 6th seasons start to hit new heights. I don't know how many of those we're going to see moving forward, because almost every college football program, major college football program in the country, had more than 20 to 25 guys transfer out of their programs. And that included the likes of Clemson and Georgia, who rarely seem to have attrition. But in this, now that NIL is where it's at, I think we're on the cusp of seeing as many outgoings every single year as there are incomings. And I think the multi-year project at schools like Texas, Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, it's harder to keep those guys on campus moving forward because they don't want to wait, and they've got people whispering in their ears that they don't have to.
Do you want me to share that image, Cash? Okay, so Anwar thought about it too.
Yeah.
I went and got it. Anwar and I were both thinking the same thing, because that really is whatever I read your column. I looked back and I was like, the audience needs to see this, because when I read your column, I was gobsmacked.
They've essentially doubled from 2022 to 2024. Yeah. So now's not the program is as deep with young elite talent as it's ever been. Ironically, you have to go to one of the worst seasons in the history of Texas football in 2010, which was the year after they competed for a national championship, when they had more. It's the only season that Texas, in the modern era of recruiting, even at the peak of Mack Brown's powers, they didn't have more young elite talent than they have right now. But there's no getting around the fact that 2025 recruiting isn't quite going as well as it needs to. But don't get the pitchforks out. They've recruited so well that they could get none this year. No elite talent, no super blue chips, none. Not even in the portal. And next year they'll be a top 5 program in the country when it comes to super blue chip players on its roster going into the 2025 season. So the program's incredibly healthy. I mean, that chart tells the story. What also tells a story, though, is that other graphic that Anwar put up of the state top 10, where Texas is. So you're caught in between these two things, Anwar, where the talent has almost never been better, but you're in a single recruiting cycle where things aren't going great yet. And Texas coaches would probably say, don't panic. Look at that one chart. Trust us. We're going to make it happen. But then fans might look at the other graphic and go, but when is it going to happen? And, those are the two places that we're stuck between.
Yeah, Catch. It's an interesting conundrum because I think that there's this there's always that belief, especially for in-state stuff, Catch, more so that because most people from Texas are going to follow more in-state than anything else. So they're not keeping an eye on guys from Louisiana and Florida and all these other places. And so yeah, you might be able to get those, and you can say, all right, maybe we didn't get the Corian Moore, but maybe you get somebody else, and maybe it ends up becoming a wash. But if you're still here, you're still looking, and that's why I always say, Catch. I think especially Texas fans, a lot of fans, and not only Texas, Florida, and California, we're so used to that living in that world where the top players from your state go to the best in-state program. That's just has always been the math, and we're having to somehow adjust to this world where that just doesn't seem to equate right now. Like the top in-state guys in any state, Catch, don't always go to the top in-state programs. Not like that team is hot, that's what I go to. There's all these other variables and factors that spread outside of NIL, and it's a total different show for another day. But I think that's the hard part when the older fan base, and I don't mean old, I don't mean like 80s or 90s or anything like that. I'm just saying like our generation, this is what we're used to, this is what we've grown up to, and these dudes are like, man, I don't know, man. Those uniforms look pretty cool. Like that's kind of cool. Like, hey, man, they got a slide. I like to go down a slide. Like, it's just different variables that we're just having to, get used to in real time. And so even if you're like, oh my gosh, Texas is one, this totally makes sense. It's like, no, but to your point, if you look at Texas and you look at their history and you look how they close strong, sure, they're like, okay, yeah, we missed out on guys before. Like we missed out on Micah Hudson last year, and we got Ryan Wingo. So it's like it's kind of the even Steven. It's like we'll figure it out. We'll end up all even when it's all said and done.
And it's also more like legitimate and credible people in their ear, right? I think that's something too, that in the past, maybe you had some kind of trainer or an uncle that worked with, one out of every 15 of these dudes who would really steer their recruitment and give them professional advice about what they should be doing, what they should be going, what they should be asking for from these schools, et cetera, et cetera. And it almost felt like that level of consultation, right, was almost looked at on the periphery of even being okay. It felt like there was a time. Catch remembers how it used to be with some of these dudes and their trainers and their uncles and stuff. It felt like it was on the periphery of being okay. Now it's like these people it's not just you talking to your parents about what's best. Like you got professional dudes. Some of these guys are lawyers. Some of these guys, positioning themselves as agents. They want to position themselves for future earnings potential from these potential clients. All this stuff. It's like the kids aren't just saying, listen to mom and dad saying like, oh, I get to be close to home, good education. I thought the presentation of the school was good. They're probably looking at all kinds of macro level stuff that we don't generally think about. And whenever there's more voices in their ears, it becomes more likely that other variations of these decisions could come to light that don't look like the way they used to look. I mean, I think it's just the natural process of things.
Yeah, and Alex, I mean, one of the things you just real quick that these kids travel so much nowadays that it's nothing to hop on a plane.
Tom Moore says from his Airbnb, taking his own kid around.
Yeah, golly, right? But my kid, by that time, what's my kid going to be like? Oh, I'm leaving home. He's like, I've been leaving home for years. Like and so when you think of the 7-on-7s that the kids go to, all the billion unofficial visits that they take, like. And look, we live in a different era where Southwest flies direct to a lot of places, man. Like, I mean, you can get to somewhere pretty easily. These kids aren't afraid to leave. So, yeah, it makes it a little bit tough. So there are some L's, but, if you're Texas, you also go to say, like, we've flipped plenty of guys. We've gotten a lot of guys late. We've always closed. And here's the thing, Catch. They've always closed with a top 5 class. So at that point, of course I'm going to believe what I'm selling, because every year I'm close with a top 5 class, and I will say to everybody else, you don't know what you're talking about. When every year I'm top 5, and I think 2 years they were top 3.
By the way, I don't know if you guys can tell, my lights are flickering a little bit. Like I don't know how much time I have left. Real quick, Naaman says, do you believe, I wanted to bring this up on work, as you and I've had this conversation. Do you believe that recruits seeing Sark will go out and load up receivers from the portal could deter them from coming to Texas? With some guys, yeah. I mean, Anwar and I can tell you there are wide receiver coaches out there who've noticed what's happened with Texas and the wide receiver position. And, behind the scenes been pretty open about the fact that, like, my guys might go to Texas, but it'd be through the transfer portal and not as high school recruits, because they may have guys that jump in front of them in terms of their development. Never heard that with DeCorian Moore, but it is something that behind the scenes is a thing.
Yeah, I mean, there is. Look, when you bring it's guys, it's competition, and you can try to tell everybody, hey, it's competition, but guys also want to look at depth charts, and guys do want to play and don't want to necessarily feel like, as soon as I get here, I'm sitting, and not playing, and because that's not what you're selling them in recruiting. You're not selling them in recruiting like you say, hey, as soon as you get here, we're probably going to just get a bunch of guys in the portal and just see what happens. Like, you're telling them they're going to play, and so because of that, there's something I wanted to find for you real quick before we head out of here, because you and I have talked about this, and this seems to be a topic amongst Texas fans, and it's been catching a lot of steam over the past couple of days. People look at Brandon Harris as maybe like the guy to blame for some of the things that aren't happening. It seems like a bridge too far for me, but I would like to see what you think of this, though.
I have a hard time blaming. Like, instinctively, I shake my head no. But what I would say is he's not helping. Like, I don't know that he's the problem. Like, I just, if I was going to, I just can't. DeCorian Moore, I just can't imagine didn't go to Texas because of something related to the general manager position at Texas. But, strategically, I do have questions about whether or not the message is landing. What is the recruiting pitch in this particular cycle? Because what's not happening that Texas has battled in the past, kids have said, we want to see Texas do it. I'm not going to go to Texas until they prove. This time last year, Sark was coming off of a 5-win season and an 8-win season. And they're talking national championships, but they're not winning the Alamo Bowl. But they did that. They won the Big 12. They went to a playoff. They put a bunch of guys in the NFL draft. So we're not hearing doubt about Texas. This isn't Tommy Brockermeyer all over again, where it's like, I can't make that leap of faith. But so far in this cycle, the message isn't resonating with the elite of the elite guys. It's just, that's a fact. Now, it may be that Texas is slow playing. I mean, we'll see. We make it to December and we'll laugh at this conversation that we had in July and say, hey, if this happens again in July next year, let's remind ourselves that because it feels like there's a panic in the streets every year under Steve Sarkisian in recruiting, but usually it happens in the spring. Usually in the spring or early part of the summer, people will go, Texas only has 4 commitments. When are the commits going to come? Oh my God, there's no commits. And then it's like, chill out. It's going to happen. Texas is up to 13. That's not an insignificant number. And of that 13, there aren't a lot of difference makers. A lot of, we put that graphic up earlier about Texas is up to 17 rivals super blue chips in 2024 going into this season. That number isn't increasing based on what's transpired so far, which just happens to coincide with Brandon Harris is the new general manager. So He's going to have – it'd be like if you brought in a new defensive coordinator and the defense wasn't very good. Is it his fault, or was there not a lot of good players on the defense that kept them from being able to be good? I don't know. I don't think we can put a finger on what the hell it really is yet, because I don't think Decorian Moore's reasoning is the same as Riley Pettijohn's. I don't think either of those two guys made a decision the same way that Lamont Rogers did. There's a lot of mitigating circumstances in this that make it hard to consistently find this is the issue.
Yeah.
But clearly something's not resonating. Something is occurring where Texas hasn't won these guys. Let's see what it looks like in a few weeks, because there are more big-time guys that are going to make decisions. And the Michael Fusi one is a big one.
Besides Fusi, Catch, who do you see as the big bellwether guys, like the ones who could be sort of the canaries in the coal mine about how we,
well, they got to get – look, I think they're going to get – I think Texas believes it's going to get Jamie French. And I'm sure they think that they probably believe that, because I don't think losing Decorian Moore hurts with Jamie French. It now, I think, maybe positions Texas to be even stronger, because he can be the number one guy at his position in the recruiting class. And look, that's not an insignificant thing. Ask Cody Carpentier. He'll tell you he got a chance to see Jamie French in Jacksonville and came away thinking that guy's probably underrated from where he is ranked nationally. I think even the guys at Rivals think that. I think he's going to be a 5-star. That's nothing to sniff at. I think you got to get French. You got to get one of the big 3 wide receivers. And at this point, I would say French is probably the more high-profile prospect. Michael Terry, Townsend. I mean, Fusi is number 1 on the list, even ahead of French for my money. And then, I think Texas is going to have to do the thing it's saying it's going to do. Golly. They've got to go back in on guys. Think about this time last year. Aaron Butler wasn't even on Texas's radar.
No, no one even knew. We didn't know who he was.
Xavier Philsammy was committed to Florida, and Texas hadn't even offered. Not only were they not in on that kid, they hadn't offered that kid. They got Kobe Black late. They got Wardell Mack in November, if I'm not mistaken.
Wingo is pretty late.
Yeah. Wingo committed in November. Brandon Baker hadn't made a decision yet. So even when you just look back a year ago, the thing is, Colin Simmons hadn't committed yet. The thing is, the difference was everybody was starting to feel really confident about Simmons and Black, and Wardell Mack and Brandon Baker suddenly looked like a guy was like, hey, I think that guy's going to go to Texas. That's where Texas was a week ago. They were like, we're going to get all these guys. And then the first couple of guys have committed elsewhere, and it's kind of shattered the vision that people were having behind the scenes about what's going to happen in this class. Sukamel and I did a recruiting show less than a month ago where we were talking about of the super blue chip prospects in the state of Texas right now. And there's like 13 of them. If you set the over and under at 5.5, would you take the under or the over? And Sukamel and I both agreed we'd take the over. But now you've lost more, at least temporarily, or whatever. You've lost Pettijohn. And suddenly it's like, well, now you would take the under. And just how much under are we going to go? I think that's the ultimate question. I think what Texas needs is to they need a Jamie French to not wait until late August to make his decision. And I know he's going to wait, but Texas could really use with a real big dog committing so Texas can put a flagpole down and say, everything's fine. We're going to do what we always do. That it hasn't happened yet is one of the reasons why there's a little bit of panic in the streets. If they had already had a couple of these guys in their commitment list just from the last 30 days or so, I just think the vibe would be totally different.
Yeah, but I would tell you this. I think, Catch, last thing I'll say on it is I think behind the scenes, they feel like they feel like they have a lot of silent commits already, that it's just a matter of time before it's all unleashed and all unveiled. They feel like, I think by mid-August or so, the perception from the outside is going to be tremendously different, and by the time we get to signing day, everyone will look
There's
back
no
and
doubt.
laugh. Right? I mean, that's what I was told over the weekend. And that's why they're like, you guys just don't know what the hell you're talking about. Because
the issue is they thought Riley Pettyjohn and DeCorian Moore 2 weeks ago were going to be two of those players. So they're looking at us and saying, you guys don't know what the hell you're talking about. Everything's going to be okay. But they were wrong about Pettyjohn and Moore. And so, one of the things this staff at times in recruiting can have is a little bit of overconfidence. You go back to when Kelvin Banks, ironically, committed on the 4th of July for Oregon back in 2021. They thought they were getting Kelvin Banks. Now, they ultimately end up getting Kelvin Banks. But when he made his decision in July of 2021, Texas was third on that deal. And on the day of the announcement, A&M and Oregon were doing Zoom calls with Kelvin Banks as his top two choices, and Texas was like in the coach's office thinking to themselves, he's going to announce to us in a few hours, and they didn't quite have their finger on the pulse. I wonder if they really. I get the sense they didn't fully understand what DeCorian Moore was thinking. I think they're a little caught off guard by what happened. Definitely caught off guard by Riley Pettyjohn, because from what I was told last week, I had a source, a non-Texas source, reached out to Sukamel and said, hey, we're hearing, I'll just say the numbers. We're hearing that Texas has offered like $550 to Pettyjohn, and that the next highest NIL offer was maybe from Ohio State or USC at about $400,000, which what a vast what a vast difference of numbers compared to what was being talked about with DeCorian Moore. I went to a source that I trust on the NIL front, and I ran those numbers by. I'm like, hey, is this right? The answer I got back was yes. And that we expect. Now, in every case, even with DeCorian Moore, when I talked to sources last week, everybody kept talking about December. We think we'll get this guy in December. Nobody was making guarantees on Wednesday or Thursday of last week or Friday of last week that Pettyjohn was going to commit to them on Saturday. But there was a sense, and by the way, need to check with Riley Pettyjohn's people, but I'm guessing that they might have seen that tweet by Sarkisian and Brandon Harris and wondered, is that about me? It wouldn't just be DeCorian Moore that might feel like they were being subtweeted at. So, but yeah, no, you're right, Anwar. They are confident behind the scenes that in a month, 6 weeks from now, this will look completely different. I tend to give them the benefit of the doubt because they've earned it over the last 3 years, but I do have questions. And they'll be answered. One thing I don't have questions about, specs, and the fact that even in a hurricane, I think they probably would deliver. Let Lisa tell you about it.
Specs same-day delivery can save the day with our Specs app or online shopping. From world-class wines to hard-to-find spirits and craft beers to gourmet foods, delicious snacks, and spectacular sweets. It's Specs. Cheers to savings.
I think Specs looks so good. He just froze Catch right up.
Hey, he made it further along.
I can't
Alex,
believe he made it this far. I can't believe he made it this far. So thanks to Specs for I'm actually heading to Specs right after this on where I'm out of tequila. So thanks to Specs for providing the tequila for me. Thanks to Specs for sponsoring the show. Of course, thanks to Rogue Shop, our great friends over there. Make sure and go check out their products, check out their services. We love Richard over there. And of course, they got everything from the salves to the gummies to the vapes to everything else, right? Rogue Shop. Make sure and check them out. One of our best sponsors over at Orange Bloods. Anwar, you got anything before we get out of here?
No, man.
All right.
Go be great. Thanks for watching Overreaction Monday.
All right, there we go. So for Catch, who is basically made it through, but now gonna go face this. It's like what was that? Joe versus the volcano. It's like Catch versus the hurricane. So Catch will be doing that today. Hopefully he'll be back on a little bit later. Thanks to everybody in the chat for being here. Please like the show, subscribe to the channel. So for Catch, for Anwar, I'm Alex. We'll see you guys a little bit later today. Make sure and stick around for